Elton John's my all-time listen to artist on Spotify. Interesting.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Listography. Jason, Joe, and Krams are here, and it's time for side 3 of Counting Crows Week. I think it's probably pretty evident by now that I'm a big Counting Crows fan, but believe it or not, at one point I was an even bigger Counting Crows fan, and back when I started hanging out with Kram and Joe was maybe around the peak of that fandom. And I know in the 93 video, I think Kram alluded to the fact that at one point I may have told him that Anna Begins was my favorite song of all time. I still really like that song a lot, as it made my top 10 songs, but definitely wouldn't call it my favorite song of all time anymore. But that's kind of the inspiration for this video. We're going to talk about songs that at one point in time may have been our favorites. Maybe we fell out of favor with them or whatever, changed our minds. Maybe we still like them. Maybe we don't like them at all anymore. But this is going to be kind of like a peek into our musical pasts. And we're just going to talk about stuff we used to like.
Well, every song on my list, and I sort of charted out, like, thinking back, what was my favorite song throughout my entire life? And I think I pretty much got it down, and I gotta say, I still like all of these songs. They'd probably still all be in my top 100 or so. I never had like a new metal phase where I was really into Limp Bizkit or something weird like that. It's been pretty much straight down the line for me. I know growing up, and this is like before my memories even start, there was a movie I really loved called American Rabbit. It was a cartoon. This is like when I was 3. And the theme song was Minuet in G Major by Bach. And I've always had a real strong emotional connection to that song. I love classical music in general, but that is the first song I remember in my life really liking. So I'm going to say from like 0 to 6, that was my favorite song. Then I was into the Beatles, so I'm the Walrus was my favorite song growing up. Then I got into Eric Johnson, Cliffs of Dover. Then I had a little Jimi Hendrix phase, so Hey Joe was my favorite for a while. And then it wasn't until I was like 14, started listening to like actual current music. And the song that got me into music was Sour Girl by Stone Temple Pilots. Still love that song. After that, I started listening to the radio a lot, and my favorite song was Every Little Thing She Does Is Magic by The Police. As a mopey teenager, Catch the Sun by Doves was my favorite song for a little while. I had a brief dalliance with Stairway to Heaven, live version from the Led Zeppelin DVD. After that, it kind of went back to When the Levee Breaks, my favorite Zeppelin song. And then after that, it's God Only Knows by the Beach Boys, probably still my favorite. Although according to Spotify, and I've been on Spotify like 6 years, Don't Worry Baby by the Beach Boys is up there in terms of most listened to. So, well, maybe one of those two. It's a Beach Boys song, all-time favorite, probably still. I think I'll go with that. I'm comfortable saying either God Only Knows or Don't Worry Baby is probably my favorite song of all time.
Yes, unbelievably, for all of our disagreements and squabbles and the billions and infinite amount of songs there are, God Only Knows is also my favorite all-time song and probably has been for a solid 10 years, which would probably give it the longest reign of anything I've ever called my favorite song of all time. I'll go with the 0 to 6 range to start off, like Joe did, which was probably Behind Blue Eyes by The Who. There is like a cassette recording of me singing it, I think when I'm 3 or 4. Always knew the lyrics, like front to back, always kind of sang it to myself. And then probably when I was 7 or 8, I had just like a giant hard rock phase. So I think probably for a good 6 months to a year, Jump by Van Halen was my number one, I'd say. Then when the BBC Zeppelin thing came out, it was Immigrant Song for a long time. Both the album version and the BBC version attributed to that. I thought it was just so badass. It still is. None of these songs I've mentioned would probably be in my top 500 anymore, which when we eventually do a songs list, that is going to be just an aggravating task altogether. It'll be slightly full of shit because how can you really, off the top of your head, go, well, my 476 is not quite as good as my 475, but whatever. It's all fun and games. Then after that, as some people might know, I got incredibly into film and cinema and still am a big cinephile and made a bunch of movies, was in media in high school and all that, eventually went to film school. So for a couple of years there, I was almost strictly listening to like movie scores and stuff like that. So that kind of overtook like my popular music listening for a bit, but eventually I got back to it. And I would say around the time I was a teenager, 13, 14, my favorite song was solidly Ruby Tuesday by Rolling Stones, which is still probably a top 10 song for me of all time. Then when I heard the Bends, there was a long championship reign for Fake Plastic Trees, which probably was my favorite song up until my new favorite song, which is God Only Knows. But Ruby Tuesday, Fake Plastic Trees, and God Only Knows are still up there for me as all-time great songs. Objectively, too, not just like, oh, they hold a meaning to me in my past, but I just still think they're just absolutely amazing songs. So obviously, as I got older, I started to favor the more tender, tactful, almost exclusively romantic songs. But if I did my list, it'd be a nice blend of, you know, even some prog in there is my all-time favorite songs. And even though Rush for a long time was my favorite band, number one for me for a long time until it became Radiohead, they never really had a song that I held above every other. It was just kind of a collection I have made, and with Jason, so many just scrapbook notepad Rush set lists, just like how the songs line up. We used to do that all the time. I've probably done it 50 times in my life, but yeah, never like a standout track. Although I have a favorite Rush song, it probably wouldn't make my top, whatever songs list. But yeah, right now it's God Only Knows, but there have been many.
I think it might be a trifecta. I don't know. I don't really have a favorite songs list, but it's probably God Only Knows.
It's so crazy, but cool.
I don't know. I spend a lot more time thinking about records and how I rank records and albums than I do songs. So this is kind of a difficult task for me, but a few that I can think of when I was really, really little, and I barely remember this, but apparently the only way that I would go to sleep when I was crying as a small child would be to put on Phil Collins. So we'll put that up. I don't even know what song it would be. I think it was I Don't Care Anymore. It was probably my favorite song.
I could see Man on a Corner being a nice like go to sleep song, just like from the low synth.
A little later, when Bohemian Rhapsody had its sort of second coming with the Wayne's World soundtrack, I heard the song and thought that I really needed to investigate Queen. And upon listening to A Night at the Opera, became obsessed with the Prophets song. So that would be an early one. A little later than that, in middle school, my favorite band was Deep Purple. And at any given time, I may have told you my favorite song was either Child in Time or This Time Around from Come Taste the Band. Or there was a point where I got really into some of their later stuff with Steve Morse when Perpendicular came out, and I really loved Sometimes I Feel Like Screaming from that record. Of course, was listening to Counting Crows through most of this time as well, and Anna Begins was always a strong contender. A little bit later, around the end of high school or the beginning of the college years, I got pretty obsessed with the song What Happens When the Heart Just Stops by The Frames. There was also a year or two where the album O by Damien Rice never left my car, and Older Chests and I Remember from that record were big for me.
Sorry to interrupt. I feel like you had Better Man by Pearl Jam as a contender in there for a while, too.
Yeah, I may have actually. Yeah, I forgot about that.
That's why I'm here.
Yeah. Unlike Joe, I did have a new metal phase. I went to Ozfest twice. I can't say many songs from that time period really stick with me that much. I was really big into Incubus for a while. So there may have been a time where I told you any of their songs were my favorite. Then I started to get more into alt country and sort of what my taste is now. I had a big Ryan Adams phase where maybe any of his songs could have landed in my top spot. Now I don't really even think about songs as being my favorite songs that much anymore. There's a bunch of songs in recent years that I would consider kind of perfect songs, but I don't really rank them that much. Not like I do with albums.
I also had an Incubus phase, and for a while when I was like 12 or 13, I was like in love with like Power Man 5000, and I remember when Sound System came out by 311, I listened to that all the time, but I probably haven't listened to that album in 20 something years. And
am I the only one without a weird sort of diversion into alternative metal and new metal and rap rock and whatever else that's interesting. I did not know you guys had big Incubus phases. I would not have guessed.
Yeah, never got too much into a lot of other rap rock stuff, but definitely, yeah. I even had like a Rob Zombie phase for a little bit.
Rush was my favorite band through pretty much all of high school. And then I got into more of what I'm into these days. And right in between there was probably a year or two where I would have said Incubus is my favorite band.
I went Beatles, Hendrix, I was confused in the 2000s. I didn't really, I guess I had a Weird Al phase in there too. And then to Zeppelin, and then I don't know what my favorite is now. That's to be determined. Beach Boys, Elvis Costello, Zeppelin, all up there for me.
The Who or Stones, and then it was Rush, maybe with a flicker of Van Halen tossed in there, and then it's just been Radiohead for God only knows how long.
All right, well, I think this opens things up to a pretty wide open discussion down in the comments. Let us know some of your favorite past songs or bands or whatever you want to tell us. I think it's a good opportunity to talk about things that we used to like, whether they're embarrassing or not. And hit the like button, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications. Check down in the description for links to our social media accounts. And we will be back tomorrow with our favorite albums of 1996. Thanks for watching. We'll see you then.
Damn, I forgot to mention Brick by Ben Folds. That was definitely my favorite song for like 6 months.
You blew it.